What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we're diving into All-Star Game, stock up or stock down. So we're going to get into the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, and hell, maybe the Hula Bowl if Jeff Bell wants to jump us on that. He was watching that this weekend. But we're going to start with our stock up. Two wide receivers out there that are doing well at the Senior Bowl. Roman Wilson from Michigan, Ladd McConkey from Georgia, both guys that we've talked about a lot on this show. So looked good today. What did we see from these guys? Just pick one of them, Jeff. Talk about them.
Well, Roman Wilson, I mean, last episode, we closed off the episode of who do you think is going to be the biggest riser of the Senior Bowl? And I obviously said Roman Wilson. And I think that going into it, the big question was going to be quick separation, because we didn't see that a lot in the Michigan game plan. They used vertically, they like to use play action. They allowed him some time to open up. And then I think what you saw day one, he can quickly separate and it's no problem at all. And I think that when you see some of these receivers, you see some of them chop their feet a little bit and kind of give some extra moves on which way they're going to go. With Roman Wilson, there's no wasted movement. He gives you one juke and he is gone, and he blows by the defensive backs. And he showed that repeatedly today. There were several times downfield, he was making plays downfield, and defensive backs were not even within 7 yards of him. And so I think that that's going to be the biggest thing that stands out for me for Roman Wilson, seeing that quick separation, because that was my biggest question when I watched him. That was the one thing that I didn't see on tape. And so the way that he was able to show that today, I think he's going to go a lot higher than what people realize.
Yeah, but I think both of these guys are. Ladd McConkey as well. You know, he's getting some lofty comps, and I think there needs to be some nuance with that. But when you have guys who can separate so clearly and so regularly, those guys tend to go high in the draft. These guys are locked into being top 100 picks. Of course, size does limit what their ceiling is at the NFL level, but these are two high-level contributors to modern offenses. And so when we're talking about what they're able to display at the Senior Bowl, these are the players that are going to be stock up players. As we get through a lot of this stuff, a lot of what you're going to see is the guys who can generate separation versus it's not really a situation that's set up for corners necessarily, but the physical corners can really take guys out. And so when you have these two guys who they don't have problems with that, I think we're going to see the rest of the week. I think that these guys are going to really stand out.
I also want to point out they do have official measurements, so I wanted to kind of give that to everybody out there too. Roman Wilson, 5'10", 186. And if at 186, that's a good number if he can run in the 4.3s, right? I don't know where he's going to run for his 40, 4.4, 4.3. I know people thinking, like, I saw some people thinking 4.4, some say 4.3. I don't necessarily know how much that matters. If he can create the separation, he can. But 186, creating that separation, I mean, he was uncoverable today, even in when they went full scrimmage. And you saw that. I mean, they had a couple missed throws from Bo Nix where he was open and Nix just missed him. But you saw that out of the slot. I mean, he was special there in terms of what he was doing out there. And then when you're looking at also, you know, Ladd McConkey, 5'11", 187. And again, like, we love the measurables. The measurables check the boxes, right? And these guys are all older prospects. As Jeff knows, has been diving into the wide receivers for the guide here at Football Guys. These guys are old. We're talking 5-year, 4-year, 6-year guys out there. But if they have those translatable skill sets, that's what we like there. So both of these guys stood out, but also from a measurable standpoint, you like what they put on there. You know, when you're seeing the height, weight, that kind of checks out too. Wingspan is really good, good enough for these guys as well. Arm length, those types of things that you like to see there. Anything else, Jeff, before we move on to the next ones?
So when I watched Ladd and when I wrote him up, my comp was Julian Edelman. And so Ladd was a high school quarterback, and I just saw a lot of similar elements in the game. And then I saw an interview today that somebody asked him, who do you consider yourself to be a comp? And he said Julian Edelman. So that made me feel pretty good. But that gives you a good idea of what kind of to expect. And so you think of a traditional slot, but McConkey is a guy that can win downfield as well. And so it's just, these guys can do a lot.
Hey, go ahead, Christian.
I was just going to say, what do you guys think the ceiling is for them in fantasy? Like, do you think either one of these guys could produce wide receiver 1 numbers down the road?
Well, I mean, seeing Tank Dell was borderline producing wide receiver 1 numbers, and I think the game has changed. I think the game has changed to the point of these slot receivers and these players that can get the ball in their hands, that they can allow them to create, are capable of doing that. That's what these offenses are all looking for. I mean, there was a lot of coming out of the Bills-Chiefs game, a lot of complaints about Josh Allen just throwing at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. But Patrick Mahomes, if you watch him over the last couple of years, he's really made that transition. And that's the way these offenses are running, because the too high, they're sitting back. And so by the ability to cure that volume, to hit targets over and over again, and then occasionally big play, yeah, I mean, there is a ceiling that they can get into that territory.
Yeah. No, I think to your point, I think the too high, the defensive coverage is important there. Also, I saw a graphic somewhere where I think Patrick Mahomes last year in the Super Bowl had a 0.2 ADOT or something crazy like that, because they were talking about how Hurts had a higher ADOT. Well, it doesn't matter when you get the ball out in space and get to these guys that create separation. And I think that's the point when we talk about that. Yeah, that ceiling could be that. And we've seen that. I think guys like Tank Dell, Puka Nacua, some of these other guys that we've seen kind of pop off in these later halves. And McConkey's been a big board guy for a lot of different people out there. Dane Brugler had him on there, like those type of guys. Roman Wilson, to me, just the production was never really there, but the offense, Michigan's offense, I don't know who watched Michigan football, because I've watched Michigan football for my whole life. That offense is nasty. It's run heavy. Just we're going to run it down your throats and we're going to target tight ends. That's what they do. And then Roman Wilson had those couple big plays every game. You're like, oh, hey, he's pretty good. Hey, he can kind of do that. I mean, if he's getting thrown the ball and he's getting 8-9 targets, I mean, he could really separate himself as being a very good fantasy producer there. But before we move on, and before Jeff keeps talking about how many hits he has, every time he says he has a hit, everybody needs just to, give him a hoo-ha or give him a like or something. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with your questions, any trades or thoughts on any topic that we cover here on the show.
Yeah. Also be sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to get a premium subscription. Elite subscribers get custom dynasty content, IDP, salary cap, and basketball content for less than $70 annually. Head to footballguys.com/plans and join today.
All right, let's jump over to some other guys that we like here. Let's pick a running back, because running backs, we don't like the running backs. Well, I like running backs. I've been diving into the running backs a lot, but we have a bunch of running backs who, did well, either at the Shrine Bowl or Senior Bowl, that you think maybe has their stock up first. I'm going to go to Christian first so he can talk about his guy so far in the pre-draft process. What did your boy Ali do? Rasheen Ali, what did he do?
He flashed really good stuff. Obviously, Senior Bowl is underway. We're gonna see more from practices, and we talked about it last week. But the Senior Bowl doesn't really have opportunities for running backs to shine entirely with their full skill set, especially for guys who rely heavily on speed. But patience when they got into their full team drills. Rasheen Ali, to me, is one of the more, the best combination of patience and then burst through that hole. Yeah. And he kind of showed out. He weighed in. The biggest part of his stock being up is that he eclipsed 200 pounds. What was his official? 206? 204. I've got to know these by heart here soon. But 204, he got over 200 pounds. That's a big number, especially if he does run in that 4.3 area, which I think a lot of people anticipate based on the film. We could be talking about a day 2 running back. And so I know a lot of people have kind of slotted a certain amount of running backs here in round 2 and round 3. But Ali, I know that a lot of some scouting services had day 2 grades on him coming into this year, and then he put better film on. He had a good first day. The Senior Bowl, I expect that to continue. I'm excited to see what he does this week.
I just want to piggyback real quick on Ali. Sorry, Jeff, I don't want to cut you off, but just what I saw today, and just diving into kind of the big runs that he had, the things that stood out to me was his patience behind the line of scrimmage and his explosiveness at the line of scrimmage. And he got small when he needed to in terms of getting behind his big offensive line and going. And he's not a small guy now. Over 200, I'm on board too. I think with his running style, there was a few runs that he had to the outside. His ability to kind of get up the field was really good. One-on-one, he had a lot of good reps, one-on-one and pass too, when you talk about his receiving work. Now, one-on-one reps with running backs. There's a caveat. I mean, it's really hard for a lot of these guys, linebackers. I saw some linebackers out there that probably selling insurance pretty soon. But he looked good when he was out there. He had those opportunities. I know a lot of guys like him. Just going through it, I believe, Trevor Sikama, I don't know how to say his last name. But, when you're looking at that, like he talked about him looking really good, explosive runs, patience, vision, burst. Really what you do with this class, you're looking for those guys. Those guys that, there's a lot of guys in the same tier who can separate themselves at these moments where NFL teams like them, and then they want to, okay, hey, we'll take him in the day 2 category. Hey, we have this role for him. This is where we envision it. That's really the Senior Bowl kind of stock up area.
Yeah, and we've seen the transition. We've talked about it with Tank Dell and with the running backs too. I mean, Devontez, we had that conversation last year being concerned about his size, but now you see the way the game is played. You see players like James Cook, you see players like Achan, you see other smaller backs, Keaton Mitchell in Baltimore, able to hold up to some of this volume and to see more volume than traditionally what you would see. And I think Ali really hit some key indicators there, and he's a player that I like quite a bit.
All right, Jeff, give me another one. Stock up. Just give me a guy you like.
Stock up. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint had one day here at practice at the Senior Bowl. I think my comparison to him was Jacoby Myers, is a player that when you watch him in Georgia, he did a lot of work in the intermediate game, and Georgia kind of kept guys siloed into roles, and they used him a little bit more vertically in 2023 than in 2022, and so he did grow and expand his game in that way. But that's a guy that he had a very good, strong day of camp, and there's not a lot of buzz on him, but I think that there should be. I think that he's a player. I know Christian mentioned him when we did our mock draft show, and I know Christian has been on him for a little bit, but that's a player that I think is going to another player that's going to be higher than what people realize. And he has a game that can translate very well to the NFL level.
You want to just talk about him since he's still your guy, Christian? Just want to.
No, I don't, and I don't want to put a claim on him. I just feel like when you watch the Georgia offense, it was very clear to see what the offense was trying to do and what it has been trying to do for the last 5 years. But when you really focus in on the wide receiver play between him and Ladd, I just felt like there was a lot of opportunity. Even when Ladd was out there, I think there was missed opportunities, and that filtered through Brock Bowers, who we don't get to talk about this week because he's not at any of the All-Star games. But no, I mean, Rosemy-Jacksaint to me is that one guy that we hear his name called at the end of round 3, and everyone's like, what the heck? That wasn't on our radar. We didn't see that in any mock drafts, but he has such a good week at the Senior Bowl. One of the things that I noticed from his practice was, generating separation was certainly a concern of mine. He's a bigger wide receiver. I think he's got explosiveness, and I think he can get out of his breaks pretty quickly. But the physicality at the top of his breaks, he's a slant king. He's able to win with physicality, and that is a very common staple in a lot of NFL offenses. So I think some teams really going to like it, especially if he kills the interview process this week, continues to show out. I am very excited to see what he does, because this is also a guy that I don't think you're still going to hear a lot about, because I don't think a lot of people have gotten to the tape beforehand. So I like him, though.
Well, I mean, I'll make a claim on a guy. Javon Baker. I'm going to say Javon Baker is one of my stock ups to me. I talked about it a little bit when we did the mock draft show, but he came in at 6'1", 208, wingspan 78, one of the biggest wingspans that you saw there. And the thing with Baker that you need to understand is, when you're looking at just PFF and everything there, yards per route run, 8th in the nation last year. Yak per receptions, 35th. So he's been there. And when you're looking at that too, with at least 15 contested targets, he had 20th in contested catch percentage. Like, he does a really good job. Strong hands, able to go up and get the ball. But I think what he showed today in this first practice, his release is special. Like, I like watching him get off the ball, off the line of scrimmage. He makes cornerbacks look silly. And when they do give him space, he has enough explosiveness to kind of get to that second level there. So, like, to me, I thought he had a really, really good first day. I think people are talking about him, which is what you like to hear. You don't want to hear nothing out of him. Like, if you watch the Senior Bowl and you don't see any highlights from a guy, you get a little nervous. Obviously, it's not the end all be all, but I do think that he has the second gear. I think he has really good hands. He has route running ability. I think also when you're looking at him, he's versatile. I think he can play outside and in the slot too. I think if he needed to, little Godwin-esque to me a little bit. I like him in that category. I'm terrible at comps. That's Jeff's thing. Jeff is the comp master there, but I thought Baker had a good first day.
Good call out. I mean, Alabama athlete, and I think that that's the biggest thing with both Rosemy-Jacksaint and with Baker. These guys that are high recruits that go to the Alabamas and the Georgias, the early production might not necessarily be there because there's so much talent in those rooms. But he definitely showed out and delivered when he went to UCF, and so I think that that's a great call there.
All right, we got to talk about probably one more stock up before we get negative and talk about stock down. Malik Washington, Christian, you want to take a shot, Malik? I know okay, for everybody out there, I do want to know if you listen to our mock draft video. Christian was going to draft Malik in like the 4th round, and he liked him. I bullied him. I said, Malik Washington, what are you doing? So full disclosure, I'm an idiot. Christian was right in terms of drafting Malik there. I wanted him to get his due in terms of that. But what do we see from Malik here at the Shrine Bowl?
First, thank you. That's one of my problems. I let you guys bully me. Malik at the Shrine Bowl has just shown what he did all season, which is an ability to get open and extremely strong hands. And I think Jeff can speak a lot to that. I know you just, I think you wrote him up. Did you write him up yet?
Yeah.
So I think you have the full scouting report, but every single time I turned on that film, why I'm turning on, Virginia film, don't ask. But every time I did, he was the guy that stood out as that is an NFL player with NFL movement skills and NFL ability to separate. And those were the things that really stood out at the Shrine Bowl as well. I know he was just cooking every opportunity, no matter what kind of drill it was. I saw him doing, some side work, like individual drills. When I was like, yeah, that's smooth. That's someone who should probably be at the Senior Bowl. But Jeff, what did you see when you were kind of writing the scouting report?
Yeah, I mean, you guys can attest that when I watch a guy, I'll come to you guys and I'll either say, this guy's not going to the NFL, or I'll say, wow, like this is it really stands out. And he's a guy that really stood out. You mentioned the strength. He's got the strength. He can win at all 3 levels. He showed that repeatedly at Virginia. He can work in the quick game. He can take the top off of defenses and work in the intermediate areas. He is quick, deceptive after the catch. He transitions quickly to those running attempts, and he has quickness there. They used him a little bit on returns. He hadn't done that much with Northwestern, and I think that that's one of the things to add context to it. Northwestern's offense last year was atrocious on top of atrocious, and we know if you followed last year, Evan Hull was in that offense, and they really just kind of gave it to Evan Hull, and Malik Washington was the leading receiver on that team, but they could not generate anything in the passing game. And so going to Virginia, leading the nation in catches, he broke Virginia's single season record in receptions. He broke Dontavian Wicks. That's a name you should know. Dontavian Wicks. He broke his yardage record, and so he broke both of those records. And again, just a player that can work in that quick game, just like we talked about at the jump with Ladd McConkey and with Roman Wilson, but also to extend that and have that strength to work in traffic, to be that number 1 receiver. He got number 1 receiver coverage. They knew that the ball was going to him, and he was really the only weapon on a bad Virginia team, and he really showed out this year.
Yeah. And Virginia was, oh my gosh. If you guys didn't watch Virginia play, which you should never watch Virginia, any highlights for Virginia is a good positive thing there. All right, before we wrap up to the stock down, anything else real quick, one-liner on any of these other guys?
Cornelius Johnson's an interesting one because we talked about.
No, we're not talking about Cornelius Johnson as a Michigan riser here. No. All right, let's go to stock down. Let's go there. Talking about, I am bullying you on that one. We are not. I've watched Cornelius Johnson too much. Someone compared him to Nico Collins the other day, and I almost ran out of my house and just jumped in the pool. All right, so Tez Walker, stock down. Tez is a guy that none of us on this show likes in terms of like where he was getting maybe put in rankings, not as a prospect, just like, hey, have some question marks there. Did not have a very good day. Got bullied today. If we're being honest, got bullied off the line, struggled with release. We've talked about him having contested catch because he's struggled to get separation. I think there's some question marks there. Did any player out, other than Tez have the worst day today, Christian?
I don't think so. Xavier Legette had a rough quarterback situation, and I think those are the 2 main receivers specifically that are stock down players. Legette, I think they ran him on 4 go balls in the showing off portion, the same one that Tez got bullied in. Legette was generating separation. It was just he couldn't complete the catches because the ball placement wasn't very good, or the ball just wasn't even catchable, and so he just kept running. Whereas like that was more encouraging to me than Tez Walker getting shoved off the line and not even being able to make a release happen. And that's been a problem with Tez Walker's game, that and his route running nuance. It's just there's a lot of rawness in that. And I know a lot of people have said, well, why don't you go back and watch him at Kent State? Well, because the corners that he was playing at Kent State obviously weren't to the same level as what he played at North Carolina. And so I want to come around on Tez Walker as just a deep ball threat because I think that he can offer that. I think that his go ball is really good. He's got really good concentration. But if that's all he is, I'm still seeing him in the top 30 in many people's rankings. I think Daniel Jeremiah has him like as his 26th ranked prospect or something like that. I just can't get there. And so I'm going to be out on him where he goes in rookie drafts if he gets that type of draft capital.
There's a lot of speed there, but you're exactly right. He can get bullied around, and we talked again about the vertical ball disappearing out of the NFL game. And so if a player that relies on that vertical ball, and then at Kent State, he put up numbers when they played Georgia in 2022 early, but it was really, he kind of had a catch where it was a wide receiver screen-ish play that he just caught it and just ran up the sideline and just really kind of caught Georgia napping. And he's the type of player that can do that, but doesn't have the strength to. I just talked about Malik Washington as a player that he's going to break arm tackles. He's a problem when you get him in space. Walker doesn't have that to his game. There's not a lot of curvilinear movement with Walker. He's a player that he's kind of going to go the direction that he's heading, and if you get a hand on him, he's probably going to go down.
That's the thing. Like, to bring it back to Christian's point as well, if you're in your rookie drafts and you know the way the NFL offenses are moving and changing and everything, why would you take Tez Walker? Like, especially with who's going to be there. If there's a quick slot receiver, Malik Washington sitting there, some of these other guys that maybe you're like, hey, they're going to translate a little bit more. I get scared of those guys. Jalen Hyatt scared me a little bit last year. Like, these guys that have these one trick kind of pony skill base, that scares me when you're looking at who else you could take that's on the board there, or even at the running back spots. I think in rookie drafts right now, if I had to value them, me and Jeff's doing this now too. It's great. Rookie drafts every night. I'm so glad he jumped on the mock draft train with me. So you're doing rookie drafts. I think, I'm used to seeing Tez go 207 to 212 right now. And there are some drafts out there that, are going. I would not be comfortable drafting Tez Walker in that range. I don't, not yet. I don't know. He's a very, very landing spot dependent guy, but even then, that scares me because I don't like drafting those type of guys anyway. Like, I'm not looking for that. There's going to be so many other kind of good landing spots for them. We got to talk about the quarterbacks because everybody loves the quarterbacks there. I think, a lot of stock down for every single quarterback in the Senior Shrine Bowl. Although I did see a Keaton Slovis puff piece out there saying how mature he is. Yeah, he should be, thinking about his age and how long he's played. But from my standpoints, Michael Penix Jr. today, they talked about his arm being very live. They like that. So that's not really a stock down there. Nix, they absolutely love what he's been able to do from like a maturity standpoint there. And they're big fans of him by all accounts. But all these other quarterbacks, when you're thinking of like who is there, I heard Joe Milton is doing Joe Milton things. He's throwing it. Not to anyone, but they are certainly flying out like a rocket out there. Hartman, Bradley, even Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler, we haven't heard those things there. What are we taking with the quarterbacks away from the quarterbacks outside of Nix and Penix, Jeff?
Day one, hopefully they get better. I think you're exactly right. We didn't not have high expectations for anybody there outside of Penix and Nix. And when you really look at, you've got the three quarterbacks at the top. You got Penix, you've got Nix, you got JJ McCarthy. That's six. Like, you're very lucky if you get more than six in a draft. And so I think that's, I think people will certainly take shots on some of these other guys. Milton's very toolsy, but I don't see that translating to the NFL level. But that's just kind of one of those things out there.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout. Spencer Rattler drew some positive interview maturity things from the people that were there, which that is the biggest question mark for me. I think he's got the arm and the ability to run multiple offenses. We've kind of seen him run in a couple different offenses now. I think one thing with Rattler is that his offensive line situation couldn't have been worse. It was kind of like he was playing for the Panthers, kind of like Bryce Young's situation at South Carolina. I'm curious to see as this week goes on what that looks like in those team situations, because I think we know he has the arm talent. If the maturity's there and the arm talent's there, I think there's a chance that's a round 3 quarterback that I might have a little bit of interest in Dynasty, because we know what the upside is with Spencer Rattler. So while I didn't hear great reviews about his passing in practice number 1, I'm encouraged by the maturity reports coming out of Mobile.
Yeah,
I do.
Go ahead.
Quick note on Rattler there, because you mentioned we do know, but not everybody watching knows. Spencer Rattler came in as a very, very highly regarded recruit to Oklahoma, and he was supposed to be the next quarterback, and then kind of Caleb Williams, the name Caleb Williams, kind of came in and took his job, and there was a lot of maturity questions. He was featured on the Netflix show. Believe it was called Quarterback. I don't remember for sure what it was. QB1 maybe, or something like, yeah, the Netflix. And he showed a lot of immaturity when he was on that show. And I do think that he's a player that has learned quite a bit, and he's grown quite a bit over his time.
I think so. One thing I want to talk about too with this is the Senior Bowl as we kind of wrap up here on YouTube. Be careful with like narratives though too much, because Rashee Rice had a terrible Senior Bowl from what I remember last year, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, she's been so bad," blah 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 blah. And now Rashee Rice is being talked about as being that next like, oh, sleeper. Look at him, he's paired with Mahomes. Hey, he's going to the Super Bowl. Like, you can take a lot from this. Like, that's totally fine, and you can look at it. You can find sleeper guys, but I also think there's a flip side of this too, where don't just take 4 days of practice or 5 days of practice and just throw away everything else, all their profile, all their stats, everything that you've looked at from the production standpoint. Be very careful with that. I think there's a happy median for both. That's how I would kind of look at that. So with that in mind, Jeff, as we kind of look ahead at this week, as we look and see, okay, what are you looking for? What are some things that you're looking for the rest of the week?
I mean, Rice is a great point, and it's illustrative, because he's not the type of player that would have had a good Senior Bowl. He's not going to be a quick separator. The Chiefs use him, kind of just get the ball in his hands, get it some blocking, and allow him to build a head of steam. And so that's not going to show out when he's one-on-one with defensive backs. I think one of the things that I talked with you guys about this class, we're really starting to see the effects of the COVID class roll through, and guys getting that extra year of eligibility. We mentioned Xavier Legette. That was a player that you're getting these guys that were 23, 24, 25 years old, and they were playing against 19-year-olds, and they didn't do much for their first bunch of college careers. And yeah, maybe they have some traits, but it's just kind of very frustrating if you're really diving in on some of these things, and especially some of these players that gave you 1 year of production when they're 24 years old, going against very young competition.
I also think that makes it difficult at times, because it's tough to discredit everything, especially if they took steps forward based on what they had done their first few years, but you also have to put some context on it, and that's an important piece. The Senior Bowl is just one piece of the evaluation, and it should not overrule anything that you had previously seen, or from our perspective, we're trying to give you the entire picture. We've talked about a lot of these guys already. We'll continue to talk about these guys as we get into the rest of the offseason, as we get closer to the draft. So we won't weigh this too heavily, but we will continue to talk about what happens for the rest of this week as well. And the full version of every show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcast. If you're enjoying the show, head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, where we're going to go talk about some Dynasty trades.